Picture the moment: a packed stadium in Boston, millions watching at home. One player walks to a small white spot, 12 yards from the goal, and the entire tournament collapses down to this single kick. This is the World Cup. The team walking up is Germany, four-time champions. Built different, supposedly, trained for exactly this, and they miss. Not once, 3 times. A team with more World Cup titles than almost anyone else in history gets knocked out by a side many fans couldn't have placed on a map a week earlier. The headlines call it a shock, a collapse, a disaster. But the real answer is far stranger than nerves. Something ancient hijacks the brain in moments like this. Something that has nothing to do with soccer and everything to do with what your brain thinks is happening when a crowd is watching you fail. Here's the part nobody expects. The players who choke under this kind of pressure are usually not the weakest ones on the field. They're often the best, the most skilled, the most famous, the ones with the most to lose. Why would the most talented person in the room be the one most likely to fall apart? To answer that, you have to go back to a single penalty kick 20 years ago, and a researcher who decided to actually study it. His name is Geir Jordet, a sports psychologist at the Norwegian School of Sports Sciences. For nearly 2 decades, Jordet did something almost nobody else had bothered to do. He sat down and watched every single penalty shootout in World Cup and European Championship history. Hundreds of kicks, frame by frame. What he found broke the simple story everyone tells about choking. Jordet discovered that a player's public status changes the odds of failure. In one striking study, he tracked what happens when a team's biggest star, its most decorated, most recognizable player, steps up to take a penalty in a shootout. You'd expect the superstar to be the safest bet, the calm hands, the proven winner. Instead, the bigger the player's reputation, the more likely they were to miss. Jordet called it exactly what it looked like. Superstars flopping under public status pressure. Not because they suddenly forgot how to kick a ball, because something else takes over the moment the stakes become personal and visible and permanent. So what is that something else? For that, rewind further to a psychologist named Roy Baumeister, working in the 1980s on a much simpler question. What happens to performance when you put someone in front of an audience and tell them this moment matters? Baumeister's answer became one of the most influential ideas in sports psychology. He called it esteem threat. When a skilled person believes their reputation, their self-image, their standing in front of others is on the line, their brain stops trusting the skill it has built through thousands of hours of practice. Instead, it starts micromanaging the movement, step by step, like a beginner. That skill you've drilled so many times it became automatic? Under pressure, your brain yanks it back into conscious control. And conscious control is clumsy. It was never built for split-second physical execution. A researcher named Sian Beilock, working decades later at the University of Chicago, gave this mechanism a name that stuck: explicit monitoring. Her experiments on golfers, on math students, on anyone performing a well-learned skill found the same pattern again and again. The moment people start consciously watching themselves perform, performance falls apart. Not from distraction, from the opposite. From paying too much attention to something that was supposed to run on autopilot. Think about it like this. You've walked downstairs 1,000 times without thinking. Now imagine doing it with 100 people staring, judging every step. Suddenly your legs feel foreign. That's not weakness. That's your nervous system being overridden by a much older alarm system. And that alarm system is the real story here. Because your brain did not evolve in stadiums, it evolved in small bands of humans, maybe 30, maybe 80 people who depended entirely on each other to survive. In that world, public failure wasn't just embarrassing, it was dangerous. If the group saw you as weak, unreliable, a liability, you could lose status, lose your place at the fire. In the harshest cases, lose protection altogether. Your ancestors who felt a surge of dread before public failure, who treated the watching eyes of the tribe as a genuine threat, were the ones who tried hardest not to mess up in front of everyone. That instinct kept them alive long enough to pass it on. You inherited that exact circuitry, the one built to protect your standing in a tribe of 80 people. Except now it fires in a job interview, in a wedding speech, In a penalty shootout watched by 500 million strangers who will never meet you and have no power over your actual survival, your brain doesn't know the difference.